Implementing the field level and data security changes in a database is a process that runs and write the code necessary, and it can actually also remove the code necessary. Going to look at how we can actually add additional tables to the source table, what you do if you add a new page to an existing table, and then we will talk a little about how you actually work with multiple databases. And at the end, I'll show how you can reverse all the changes. So if the only thing you have is your production database and you now want to upgrade, you just run the process of removing all the code, and then you don't have any impact on the cost of an upgrade because there is no changes. If we look at how a typical customer would actually have a setup for a larger NAV customer, there will typically be three databases. There's a development database. It could very well be that the partner actually maintaining that one. Then there will be a user acceptance test, a staging database where you test new features before you put it into production. And then of course the production database. In the development database, you have the Easy Security objects imported, but you don't run any of the code to actually implement the code changes. That means all the objects are as they came from Microsoft or an ISV. It's very easy to implement a cumulative update or in general to do upgrades to this database. As you get ready to deploy new changes or updates to the customer, you import objects to the user acceptance test. And you can replace the objects in there. There's no need to preserve the code that we're adding in there. We can always write it again, and it's completely generic, so we can add it one more time again. After you have imported the objects, you just run implement changes in code for the regular process for all the objects in there. Don't just filter on the one imported. You can do that one, but there's no reason not to run the same process every time. It prevents mistakes if you forgot to filter on an object, for example. As you get ready to move this to production and you have tested everything, you actually move the objects directly from UNT compiled with all the code implemented. In that way, you don't have uncompiled objects or any of the things associated with that in a production data system. To get to the data, we will have all the objects we change have the exact same date and time. So that's an easy way of figuring out what objects to take from UAT and put into your production database. But let's take a look at this one inside NAV and run through a couple of scenarios in here. I have a 2015 version with Easy Security completely installed. Currently in the Easy Security company, where I will be able to actually run the implementation process. We always suggest you have an Easy Security company to separate the data and also to be able to restart if necessary. If you put it in a regular company, first you have issues that super users potentially also have access to this, but also that if you want to restart, you have to find a way to clean out everything that is in there before you can redo your install. If you use a single company, you just mark the company the right way and then you will be able to actually run the implementation one more time again. Most of the data for the implementation process is actually saved inside the objects. So even if you decide to redo the company, the source table setup, for example, will actually be reused from that one. As you set up field level and data security, the first thing you do is you decide which tables you actually want these advanced features on in here. And I can see in this case, I took some in the finance and some in the sales area. I really also want to include some of my purchase side in here. So I want my vendor side and I want my purchase in here. So my vendor is 23. My vendor ledger entry is 27. And I can then go in and also add my purchase header and purchase line in here. You can always add objects very easily in here. If you want to take away the code from one, you have to first delete all the changes and then run it one more time. So it's better to start off small and then add tables because it's a really easy process, as you will see in here. So I now selected the tables, and I can see out here, based on the source code analysis we originally did, it knows what pages are linked to this one. And it's done by scanning the code. So if you had ISV solution or customizations, those one would also be in here. I want to run the implementation process, and it actually works on top of the text file of NAV being the source code. To do that one, I need to go to Designer and export that one. We don't need to export every object in the system. We actually have a function here that can mark the object, so we can use all the one that we need for implement changes in code in here. As I run this function, I can see it marked 156 objects with a value in DBM table number being 2 in here. The DBM table number is a field that is not used any longer, or it has only been used in the classic database. So if I go here and filter for objects with DBM table number 2, I'll see my tables, and we don't change the tables, but we need to read some information from them. And then I have all the pages associated with those tables in here. I need to export these ones, and we always suggest exporting them both in FOB and also as a text file, of course, because we need the text file. Oh. Did I select the wrong one? I want to export my objects. In FOB, and a customer license can normally export that one. But when I go to export these ones in text format, unless you purchased one of the more expensive developer modules, you cannot do this one. But this one again is a one-time process, so I will switch to a partner license. Filter on my DBM table number again being 2. And run my export to text now. So now this one allows me to export the objects to text in here. I want to select that file, and the location of this file is a little tricky in here. The service tier is actually going to read this file. It can potentially be very big, so we can't do an upload download function. So you always want to put this one in a location where the service tier and the account that run the service tier actually have access to it. It's typically anything that is UNC path starting with // would actually work in that way if the service account have the access to that folder. So I want to select that file. It create another file name for the output, and then I want to run the implement changes in code in here. This one goes through, it reads the table information we need, and it will go through the pages. And if the code is missing, we'll just write the code in here. So in this case, it's like we're just adding it as we need it in all the parts related to purchase in here. So I can see in here 49 pages was missing the code. I had 96 that already have it in here. We also create 3 code units, and they are in our own range, and we use those for filtering and initializing data in other companies. But I ran this install process, and I'll go back here and import my output at this time. And again, I want to do the text file. And I can see it's a lot less in here. But as I import this one, you see the DBM table number disappears. It's not used for anything, and the value don't really stick. It's not getting exported or anything. It's just a temporary value inside the object list that we're using in here. So if I now go look at it, I can see some objects came in uncompiled in here. And if I filter on that one, we have 3 code units in our range, And then we have all the things related to the purchase side in here, the places where we actually needed the changes. If I had overlaid an object with changes in there that was not in there, I would see that that object would actually also be modified in here. Or if I had added a field and didn't have the code for it, don't try to do this manually, just add the process and run it through in here. All of these objects have exactly the same date and time, and that's how you actually will find these ones when you want to move them to a production database from a UAT, for example. So as I run this implement function, it actually now added all the code in here. If I went here, I would see that I would now be able to actually set up user security for my vendor table. It defaults created this read-only for me. So if I now go to purchase, I see my menu items gray out. When I look at a single one, it's completely read-only in here. Every field is grayed out too in here. So that's a regular way of adding a table in here. Let's say I went in here and I actually went to the customer cards and I want to add some additional fields in here. So I want to find my customer page. I can go into create a new group in here. And I just want to add, for example, the name and the address down here. As I adding these fields, when I now save this page, they have to have unique names. I used existing fields, so that was not a smart idea. But so I now added these fields, and if I go back here, I'll make a code that would make these fields be read-only, and I will see that they actually don't work in here. So let me create a new one in here. I want to create one for my customer, and I'll just call it no edits on cart. And I want to go down, add my customer card, leave the it editable in here, but go out in the fields and say that every field is only view in here. And let's just do every action view also in here. So in this case, I leave the page itself editable, but every field should gray out now. So as I apply this no edit on cart, see that all my fields show up correctly, except my two fields that I added in here, my name and address, because the code to control them was not implemented. So again, as I did this change, I want to go run the implementation process. Same as before, mark the objects I need. All 156 is now number 3. Go to the designer. All object types, and install objects number 2. I will skip exporting to FOB, but normally we export to FOB, so if one of the objects don't compile, it's typically not caused by our code, it's caused by access to controls or problems that already existed in the object. we can always revert back. As I now run this implementation process, I'll see in here that I should only have one page being modified. We always modify the code units, and that's actually because we have code that relates to every field in there, and fields could be changed even if none of the pages actually would be changed in here. So I can see one page was modified, and that was because my 2 new fields are added in here was needed to be controlled also in here. So I can see my 3 code units and my customer card, and as soon as I compile this one, I'll see that if I go back, look at my customer again, my fields are now grayed out as they should be in here. One thing to notice, by the way, is that you can see up here the field contact is actually not grayed out as it should be. That's actually because there's code already written for that field. That means that we can't implement our code because something is already controlling it. It's used a few places, and we have a way of finding that one actually. We can use our controls. That's actually the information that we generate from in here. And we can see the code that is implemented on visible, editable, and hide value in here. So if we look at it, I can see there's certain variables. We always create them with this one. So if I actually want to filter on my editable code being different from ESACC asterisk, I'll see all the blank ones, and I also want it to be different from the blank code. I now see all the ones. Some of them just say false as fields that are just not editable, but you can see here in the page 21 being the customer card, Microsoft already added code to control the contact. There's 2 ways of handling this one. One would be just to delete this one and run the process, or figuring out if you needed this one really in here. And it's only a few places where it's actually used by standard NAV in here. So I added new tables in here. I made a change to an existing object. If I go add a new page in here that is using an existing one, we would need to do a source code analysis. So let me go in here and add a new page. I'll add the page for the customer. Oops, I want to use the wizard in here. List page. And just have a few fields on it. So I added my new page in here, and if I don't do anything, as I actually go in here, I would export my objects, or first I will mark the objects, and I still only get 156 in here. And that's of course because my relations don't match any longer. So one of the things I can do in here is I can export all the pages and all the tables. But if I know what I have done, I can just go in and say I know all of them have my modify flag. I'll just say new objects. Go in and select my new objects in here. And I can then get the relation from the source codes. And it I say I already did this for the roles and logins. I don't want to use that, so I'll say no. And it actually read my file now. As I now mark my objects, I can see I got 157. I now told Easy Security about the new page using the customer table, and that's why it added one more table in here. I actually already have it in here since I exported it in text, so I can just run the implement changes in code in here. And I can see one page was modified, And all I have to do here is then go and say for my new objects out. That's the code I actually want to compile in here. Or I actually want to filter on all the uncompiled because, of course, the code units came in again in here. So in this case, I have been adding changes in here. I added new pages, added new tables, and have done modifications to existing objects in here. If I have this database and that's the only thing I have, and I now want to update, I want to get rid of all this code in here. And we can actually export and mark all the objects in here. We could go ahead and only mark the one for implementing, but if something was wrong or data was not up to date, we would probably want to mark all the one for the source code, because that's the tables we actually want to remove the functions on. In this case, it actually goes in and it will mark all these objects in here with table number 6 in here. So if I now go here and say I want all the one with DBM table number being 6, and go ahead and export these ones to remove code.txt in here. It will take a little while to export in here. You can also do this for a single page if you want. If that's the only thing that is in the text file, that's the only thing that is going to have the code taken away in here. Right now, as we're marking these objects, I get every object in the system. We can, by adding the object to the object properties and saying skip during export, actually avoid that object being marked. So if you have objects that don't compile or certain things, you can actually avoid those ones being changed in here. So I exported all the objects. As I now go remove code text file, and I run under actions advanced, I have the delete changes in code function in here. I don't know why for some reason hiding back there. Okay, so in this case it now goes through, and if it finds the code in there, it will go ahead and take away all the code changes in here. What it's actually doing here, it's searching for the ESACC underscore. So you can actually go hide that more, even implement that in other fields. It could be that you had variables being shown and you want to use another field to control those ones. This function will actually also delete the changes on that one. So as soon as I'm done with this one, the only thing I will have left is a time and date change, and all the automated tools for normally implementing upgrades would be able to ignore objects that only have date and time changes on them in here. So there's only a single % left of them in here. I can see 144 pages had the code removed. And I would need to go import my output file. And I can see that will be all the pages where I actually had the code changes in. All the setup in field level and data security refer to field numbers and action numbers on pages. And as soon as I have upgraded, when I run the implement code again, I will have the code working as it did, because even between NAV versions, all these numbers typically stay the same. Field numbers and objects always. Actions are very rarely changed between versions of NAV. So I can see if I get rid of this one, I'll see again all of them having exactly the same date and time, and the 3 code units. As I'm done compiling, all the code would be removed and I can easily upgrade. The changes are quite extensive what is being done to the pages. Very low impact on performance. It only adds a few columns or add columns to the data set. And as soon as the code is implemented again, it works the same way.